Okay. Right. Okay. So it is lesson number 4. So we before I start, we've got one lesson next week, and then the following 2 weeks we won't be around. Partly because it's half term, and also um, I'll be away for the first one of the 2. So got next week, and then after that we're off for two sessions, and then we're back and carrying on. Okay. Now, last week we looked at using inks. Okay, and I did this big picture of a flying owl, and the idea behind that was to look at tone and shadow, start using a brush and some wet media, and also to start layering up those techniques that we've been learning to do with mark making and so forth. So if you haven't finished doing that work yet, you can carry on. I suspect most of you have finished that off now. But the idea behind that was that you could start quite light with the inks, and you didn't have to be too precious about the marks you were putting on, because essentially you could darken the ink on the next layer and then put some more marks back over that, and you could build up this beautiful sort of layered effect to get all those textures. And then of course you could add washes of ink back over the top afterwards to add more tone in, which you would have seen me doing last week. So this week what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at parrots. So I looked at that picture of a parrot last week, and I thought they're they've got so much character. They're really bright and colourful. They have these wonderful expressions on their face. And as I said, there's loads and loads of colours on them and textures and things like that. So I started my parrot not during the lesson, as I said I would last week, but I started it last night. And so what we're going to use to do that is going to use some acrylic paint. And so the first thing you'll want to do is draw out your parrot. If you've got one there with you, there's loads on the drive. If you haven't, you can work from your mobile phone if you need to as well. Now I drew my parrot out freehand, so I just sketched it out. What I did is I sketched out the main shapes of the parrot first, like the head, the beak, the wing, and so forth. Got those main shapes in, and then went in with a little bit of detail, quite loosely, but refining those shapes as I went. Now the next stage I'd like you to do is start to apply a wash of colour over the whole picture. So this wash of colour would be a mid-tone, so it would be neither really dark nor really light. It'll be in between, because we're going to be working over with the shadows and the highlights on the bird in a limited colour palette to begin with, and then after that we'll start applying some more colour. Now if you've got them, we'll also be trying out some oil pastel techniques over the top, because oil pastel, as you probably know, is a dry medium and it allows you to do lots of mark making as well. So we can apply those back over our acrylic paintings if it looks like the sort of thing that we might want to do on there, because some of you might get to the stage and you think, well, actually no, I finished this, I don't want to put any oil pastels over the top. But we'll see how we get on. All right, so I'll show you what I've done so far over on the wall here. So here's my parrot. My parrot was doing this morning. We were doing the Monty Python joke. The parrot is dead. But sorry. So anyway, here's my parrot, and so I sketched out the outlines of and the shapes of this parrot as I showed you this one last week. So here's a picture of the sketch that I did from that. Now if you prefer to use a grid, then please do so, or indeed you could take your photograph, fold it into 4, so you've got 4 sections to work into, or to help you to get the shapes in the right place. And a few people did do that this morning, which was really useful, just to get going on it and everything like that. So as you can see, it's quite loose. I haven't completely shaded the whole thing. I've just left a few marks as an indication of tone and shadow on the picture, without going into too much detail, because essentially what I'm going to do is a wash over the top of this. When I say wash, it's more like a layer of paint with a flat brush, and this color you can see on the bottom there is the one that I used, and it's a sap green. So we're going to put a sap green layer of color over the top. So I'll show you that one. So now when you do it, what you want to make sure is that that some of your marks are dark enough to see through the paint, but the other side to that is when you mix the paint, mix it with a little bit of water as well. This will obviously help you to spread the paint over the surface, but also then to apply to apply it in a flat way, so that we can then obviously later work back over the top. Now the lucky thing of course with acrylic paints is that they dry really quickly, so you'll find that particularly if you're in a nice cozy room, the acrylic paint will dry quite quickly, and you'll be able to crack on with working on it. So you don't want loads of water, you just want enough to loosen the paint up, but I'll show you that on the next screen over on my desk. All right, so here we are. That was my owl from last week. We've just talked about that, so I won't talk about it again. So you're aiming for a nice flat and even sort of coating of paint. And what you really need is something like this, which is a flat ended brush, or a flat brush they're called. So here we have, oh, it's wobbling. There we go. So yeah, it's a flat brush. In other words, it's got this kind of what you might call chiseled end on it. It's a square sort of shape, and it's perfect for doing nice flat areas of color like this. All right, so I'm going to do that on here to sort of demonstrate that for you a little bit. Okay, so here's my sap green. Now I really like to use recycled materials as much as I can. Now I just wanted to show you this because I showed everyone this morning. So this here is a plastic tray from I think it had lamb in it or something like that, but these are really stiff and they're really quite durable. But one of the things about acrylic paint is when it's dry it goes kind of hard and rubbery or plasticky, and you can peel it off of this and it's clean straight away, even after drying and things. So I've just used this to do a little bit of the painting today, but the other things I like to use to mix paint in sometimes are just lids off of, this is a Nescafe jar as well. So if you've got something around like that, I find them quite useful. So I'm going to put some in this Nescafe lid here, and then I've got my water over in this pot here as well. So just mix in a little bit of water by just putting your brush in like that, and then mix it all around so it's nice and even and not globuly. Globuly, that's a new word. There you go. See, I'm all for keywords in this, like a proper teacher. There we go. Okay, and then what I tend to do is paint across one way, and you might need to revisit your your water pot. And you can see, I always say, or I often say, that using a flat brush is a bit like using a marker pen, because you've got that kind of, like I said, chiseled edge on there. So add a bit of water as you need. So while it's wet, it's still quite malleable, but as I said, it will dry quickly. And then once you've gone one way, go the other way. So I've gone horizontally, and now I'm going vertically across the picture. Now you're working over the top of your drawing when you're doing this, and you'll see my parrot that I painted a little bit of today, but you should be able to see your drawing through it. So don't do your drawing too, when you've refined the edges and things, do them slightly darker so that you can see right through to your drawing. But even if you cover up some areas, you can work back into it a little bit more with your pencil so that you can see the details a bit more. But this is what I did today. Okay, so you can see what I'm getting at here. So a little bit perhaps. So if I zoom in, you can see Polly just here. So Polly has this lovely white face, and I've got a picture of Polly just here as well. And basically, this mid-tone that I put on here, this nice green, acts as kind of a middle point between the white and the black that we're using. Okay, so as soon as you start adding white or a really dark tone on the top, what you end up with is your picture starting to emerge out of the background, which is loads of fun. I really like working in this way because it's kind of got this immediacy to it. Okay, now I said black, but it isn't actually a black that we're going to use. And you'll have, if you've had my classes before, you'll know about me talking about this before. So these two colors here, which come in a standard set of colors, are ultramarine and burnt umber. So if you've got a standard set of acrylics there, then these two colors mixed together in equal measure will create a black. A nice, well, when I say black again, it's not actually a black, it's a chromatic dark tone, or black if you want to call it black. It's actually kind of a deep brown, but what you do is you take those two and you mix them together. So let me just make Polly a bit smaller again. It's a bit difficult to see on here actually. But basically you mix both of those colors together, and I'll get a smaller brush for this because I'm finished with that other one now. So equal amounts of the blue and the brown, which is burnt umber and ultramarine, and you get a beautiful dark color that you can paint with. Okay, so I'll do a bit of black and a bit of white so that you can see what I'm talking about. So at this stage, what we're going to do is stick with these kind of colors, the whites and the darks, so that we can add some of those tones into your picture. And then later, perhaps even in the next lesson, I'll show you how then to apply more color to your picture as well. So sometimes it might be a glaze of color, which is a really thin layer of color. Sometimes it might be, you know, thicker, so that you can bring those colors forward and make them more vivid. One of the nice things about this as well is the fact that you do get little tiny bits of the green coming through your picture, your painting, but with acrylics you can really layer them up, particularly because unlike oils, they will dry really quickly, and by the time you come back you'll find that it is getting pretty close to dry, if not a little bit damp. Now whilst I'm doing this, I'm not painting like blocks of color here. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm using some of those mark making skills that we've been learning. So dashes of this dark color to put his punky hairdo in over here. I've got a picture of him just here as well. So small dashes. I don't know if I get any closer than that. Yeah, we get a bit closer. There he is. Right, so I'm just building it up with white and this beautiful black as well. So there you can see what I've done there. And so it's almost like just a tonal painting at this stage, and then you can start bringing in the other colors that go with your parrot a bit later. Somebody did actually say this morning they wanted to do a kingfisher, so if you've got a different bird in mind, I absolutely don't mind that. It's just I really thought that these parrots were amazing. So I thought, right, I'm going to do some parrots with you today. But if you've got a kingfisher or indeed another bird that you fancy doing, then have a go with that one too. Okay, so this is what we're doing first of all. So with the acrylics, they will like we did with the inks, you'll be able to build up multiple layers of marks and so forth to get this texture in the picture as well as the tone, and then we can add the color back into it as we move on. All right. Okay, so that's where we are at the moment. So you could draw, first thing to do is draw out your bird. You can use a grid if you want to. You can divide it into 4 if you want to. You can do it freehand if you want to just go for it. I suggest doing it if you've got paper this sort of size. This is A3. Try doing it a little bit bigger this week if you're working smaller before, because it really, if you get, we're doing a close-up of a bird. So if you can get close up with your mark making, you can really explore these paints a little bit more, particularly with detailed pictures like with Polly over there. And there are some fantastic ones that I've shared with you on the drive, so do have a look at those because they're really nice. Okay, so as you can see, I've already started painting the face of this parrot before. But what I'm going to do now is continue working into the tones and shadows. So I'm basically creating a picture which is just very monochrome, black and white. But what I do a little bit later on is I start to add tints of colour back over the top to bring the picture to life. And you'll see me do that a little bit later on. But for now, I'm using acrylic, white acrylic, so titanium white, and occasionally you add a little bit of water to the paint, and those colours that are underneath will come through, of course, because the paint becomes more translucent. So you can get variations on the whites and the blacks that I've made there using burnt umber and ultramarine. So you get a lot of variation, very much like we did previously when we used the Indian ink to build up layers of marks. So you can start quite lightly with the blacks and the whites in this, and then refine your marks or build and lay your marks on top of each other to create the texture that you're looking for within the painting. So the background being green, being kind of a mid-tone, helps to bring out those whites and blacks, so you can clearly see where the subtlety in the drawing is coming out. So just there I felt like I just wanted to add a few extra lines just to sort of map out where some of these feathers are going to go. I don't actually get much further back than this, but I do have a lot of fun beginning to sort of work things out. And I do, it seems quite painstaking as well that I'm using a very small brush, and it was I think it was a number 1 or something like that that I was using to do this. So a small round brush, so it doesn't hold lots and lots of moisture or acrylic. So you need to keep dipping back into the water, grabbing a bit more paint, and keep layering those techniques over. But as we did with the Indian inks, it's a lot of fun because you're building up those marks, as I keep saying. So we're just doing the back feathers here. And you can see actually when things are speeded up like this, you can see how the water in the paint goes down quite reflective, almost like and shiny and wet, and then as it dries it kind of disappears a little bit because as I've mentioned in the video, you know, you put the color down and it's wet and it's kind of brighter or dark or whatever, but as the paint dries, it lightens up, becomes more translucent because you've got the water in it. So it's quite interesting from that point of view to see that happening. So on we go with the adding in the tints or the highlights on the feathers, and building those areas up. And I think I'll move up to the top shortly as well. So we've got this lovely black and white image. When we've done portraits previously, we've done something quite similar using this sort of idea of creating an underpainting with all the tones and the shadows and the highlights and stuff in them. A lot of portrait artists will do this as well. It's quite a traditional technique, this one. It's also known as grisaille as well. So you create an underpainting and then you add the colour back over the top, and you get some lovely strong contrast within your image when you do this too. And this was the make of the brushes that I've been using. Very cheap brushes online. I got them on the usual place, Amazon, and I think it was 50 brushes for £12 or something ridiculous like that. But I've always found them quite useful to use for teaching classes, and so I'm sure that you would find them useful to work with as well. Right, so continuing to layer those marks on top of each other. There's lots of very small dashes over the top because I'm quite keen to suggest the fibres in the feathers and things, you know, the very thin hairs, if you like, in the feathers on there as well. So I'm building up those layers very gradually too. And then going back in with some of the tonal shadows too. And now we're beginning to apply some of the colours. So I'm using a bit of burnt umber with a slight bit of the ultramarine in there, just to add in some tone into the face and shadow into the face. But then I've gone back into it with white to highlight some of the other features that are there and bring those back in again. And what I wanted to do in this lesson is just to start adding some of the colours and things into it just to demonstrate how that might work. So obviously I would have perhaps have done the whole of the bird like in the black and the white, but here let's just have a look and see how this works. So all I'm doing here is really tinting the image that I've already painted underneath, and you can see there I'm adding highlights back over the top of the tinting, and that obviously keeps going with those details and marks over the top. So you can see how wet the paint is whilst it's being applied. It means you can move it and blend it in with what's underneath, and also you can blend the colours. So it's very much like using a watercolour, I guess, in some ways, in that, you know, you can use the transparency to make the image stronger, to make the colours blend rather, sorry. So I'm adding here I'm adding some cadmium yellow mixed in with some orange as well, and we can see how the parrot starts to come alive and starts to look a bit more like the parrot in the picture. So I don't know why I started speaking like that then. But there we are. So a lot of fun playing around. Obviously it's not finished, but you've got the idea now, I think, about how to tint this picture and highlight it, and then add in these thin layers of paint back over the top. And you can continue building layers back in after that. And indeed, that's what is very good about acrylics, is the layering of the paint and the adjustments you can make, because it dries nice and quickly as well. So I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson, and we'll come along and have a look next week too. I'll probably be doing a little bit more on this one next week. But thank you very much for coming along.